So the purpose of our workshop here today is for you guys to gain more skills to navigate your partner data and analyzer. We want to give you tools and resources to use partner CPRM and meet other network managers like you. Hopefully they will join later. We will be covering a walkthrough of a few scenarios on how you can use your data and reports. We will be looking at analyzer features so you can use your partner CPRM, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end.
And so part of this purpose of this workshop too is to be, you have data. So now what? So network data can be overwhelming at times. There's a lot of information in there, especially when you download the raw data. There's a lot of information that you can really digest and even use and look across data points and see if there's any themes or any interesting findings, or even look at an attribute across a data point as well to see if a specific org type is perceived as more valuable or more trusted, right? So there's some interesting findings that you can pull from your raw data as well. But when you go into, so I'm going to kind of pull between this PowerPoint and the platform. So, oh, I didn't actually mean to stop sharing though, but I just meant to stop this part. So when I go into our project here, you can download your data at any time, especially when you're finished with data collection. So at this point in time, what's really great about the raw data, here, let me select this. And since you know your way around a spreadsheet, for the most part, it's really self-explanatory in terms of what each of these sheets do. They each have kind of a specific function and hold different type of data within them. Sorry, I don't know why my little start button won't go away. There we go. Okay, so in your raw data sheet, you will see a few sheets down here, and let me zoom in here. You have a tab that's non-relational data. So this is all of your questions that were just single choice or multiple choice. If there was an other, please specify. Those will kind of show up here as well. See if we have any to show you as don't have one there, but it would show up here just like as words in this column if anyone had selected it. So this is your non-relational data. What's nice is it's set up in this way so that you can easily do averages, you can do counts, you can easily export it out and put it into another statistical program like SPSS or SAS or anything like that. So that's really awesome in that way as well. We wanted to make it really easy for you to use or interpret, you know, at this level. This is the relational tab, and in this tab, this is where you get the really interesting things about each specific dyad within the network. So you have, oh, and I see we have one person joining us. So I'll pause after I go through this and we'll do an introduction. But in your raw data here in the relational tab, you have your heads and your tails. Your heads are those who took the survey, those are the respondents, and the tails are those who they chose as a partner in what we call that network member selection question. So this is who they picked as a partner, and then this is all those relational questions that followed and how they answered them. So this is like, as a network manager, there's a wealth of information in this sheet alone. So you can sort specifically by heads, and you can look at how organizations chose their partners, how they perceive their partners. You can flip it around and sort by a tail and see, do organizations perceive that partner the same way? Are those relationships reciprocal? You know, and kind of look at it that way. And so it's really interesting to kind of look at those perceptions. When we do the value and trust scores, those metrics are out of how an organization is perceived by their partners. So if you really wanted to know that information, you would sort by the tail, and then you would see how everybody is perceiving that specific organization, and that's how those scores are calculated. But this is kind of in the raw sense of where you could see that. And you might see that there's some missing rows here, and or missing cells with data, and it's like, well, what does that mean? This just means that this partner chose them. This organization chose them as a partner, but then decided not to answer any of the questions, either about that partner, about any of their partners. We see that typically in our data. For whatever reason, some people either don't want to answer, or they feel or they may have like missed it, right? There might be a lot of cells on the sheet that they may have just missed it as well. So there's a couple instances, but you'll see that's the case. But if I sorted by this organization, you can tell down here that it looks like they probably didn't answer about any of their partners. They just chose their partners. And so that's, we can go more into that later if you have questions about that. But this is where you can really find some information. So if you wanted to sort your data by this level of involvement, what could be really interesting is you could take that a step further and say, okay, here's your level of involvement. Now, what are the types of that it do its thing, sort by everything by a number. So these are all the relationships that were categorized as awareness, right? That have a 1 next to them. Now I can look to say, okay, well, these are activities that partners said that they work on together or outcomes that they might have achieved together. So now you can take it that step further and say, okay, well, are they working on, like, what level of activity are they working on? Does that increase with the level of intensity? Does the value of what they're receiving from their partnerships increase as that intensity increases, right? Because we know that everyone's time is valuable. Everyone has a relationship budget, right? Like they can, so really trying to figure out what's the balance that everybody needs to have with their partners, right? And figuring out where is that sweet spot to get that the right level of activity or the certain types of activities to occur, right? At what level of intensity. So you can really dive deep into the data that way. And we can always walk you through or you know, set some stuff up for you and go through that more if you have questions. Your open-ended data is just that. It has any question that was an open-ended question. So you can sort and just pull that out here. Survey codes. This has the information about what was asked in your survey, so you can see what were the actual responses here. Did we have any attributes that we tagged tagged these organizations with? So we have org type, we have some other attributes here. That all comes downloaded with it. So you can take this org type and you know, put it next to this, you know, column here, and then you can start looking at it, looking at themes across org type, right? And see if there's interesting findings about what, you know, resources they're contributing, or how successful they feel that the partnership or the network is going, right? There's different things like that. The Alter network won't really apply for CPRM projects. This is more for our Partner Me product, but and then our matrix questions, if you included a matrix question in your survey, this is where that lives, and it kind of shows up the same way that's in the relational, or excuse me, the non-relational tab, where it has the number here, like the code, and then the 1 or 0 if they selected that. Okay, and so let me go back to our PowerPoint. So the next part is kind of our analyzers. So I'm just gonna hop into here. So when you go into the partner CPRM, right, and you go into the analyzer area, there are a few pieces, you know, that you can, or tabs, right, that you can work with your data. So you have a network map area, you have a GIS map area if there's addresses that have been provided, you have network scores, and you also have charts and graphs. You again can also export and view your raw scores as well. There's like a little extension on Chrome that you can add that easily can capture that table and can download it. But let us know if you need help with that, or you want us to just kind of grab those scores for you and download them. You should have them in your reports as well. And then you also can access your member profiles too from the analyzer. So I'm going to jump back into, if it will get out of this for me. So this is the platform, right? So when you log in, you have your overview screen, your members survey emails. We've kind of handled this first part here, right? When you were doing data collection and you were setting up your survey metrics. Now we're kind of right in this part where you can play with your data and you can analyze it. And so when you go into your analyzer, so right now it kind of has a few things set up. So I'm going to just reset some things so that it's just kind of a blank slate for us. I'm going to start backwards here because we'll spend a little bit more time in the network map area. So in your charts and graphs, you can visualize any of those non-relational questions or those open-ended questions. So right here is an open-ended question, and it's showing, you know, the organization and then how they answered. You also have the ability to show a bar chart, column, or a pie chart as well, for different data points too. So, and we are making updates to our analyzer. So stay tuned. These will, in the next probably 6 months or so, this feature will be updated. And so there'll be lots of fun new functionality over here too. So um, with the network scores area, this is where those trust and value metrics are calculated if they were used in your survey. So at the network level, we also include a density score. So that's like out of everybody, if everybody answered the survey and everybody chose each other as a partner, that would be 100%. So that number is a little bit reflective, right, on your response rate too, and to kind of take that into consideration. Um, and then your value and all these other metrics here are out of 100%. And so those over 75 are considered the most positive. And so this is at the network level. So it's taking all the perceptions of all members and it averages them across. And then the overall score averages the three scores together. And then at the individual level, this is where you can dive in and you can see the same scores, right? These are shown as numbers, but it's kind of the same philosophy. Those over three are considered most positive. And so what I always like to do is like come in here and play around and say, okay, I'm going to sort by value and I'm going to see, okay, well, who's the most valued in our network? Like, who can we rely on if we need to like pull some, like leverage some strings, right? Or we need to pull some influence, or if we really need people to like buckle down and like help out with some things, right? Or if you need to figure out like if you're going to be talking about a really challenging topic or something that might cause some tension, right? Who's going to be the most open to discussion, who might be willing to kind of help you navigate that difficult conversation. So you can use these scores in different ways. What another fun way to look at it is if you look at if you and you can sort by least to most, is you can see that while this youth service organization may not be perceived um, as highly valuable, right? They are perceived as trusted. They are reliable. They show up and they are open to discussion, right? So it's looking at the whole, kind of like a holistic approach of looking at an organization too, right? Like what can they bring to this network? What can they bring to this this coalition of partners? And how can we leverage everybody's different strengths, right? We don't want everybody to be the best at everything, right? But we can leverage the strengths that organizations bring. One way to take also to look at these scores is you have your degree centrality. Your degree centrality is essentially your key player score. So this is this percentage will tell you the percent of partners that this organization is connected to in the network. So you can see that this, childcare organization has a really low degree centrality, but they're only connected to one organization. So that's expected. But when you go and you sort by the ones who have the most degree centrality, these are the folks that a lot of people rely on, or they have a lot of connections or connectivity within the network. So what can be interesting about these folks, right, is if they leave the network, or if or if something happens, right, like, or if you need to spread information, these are your folks that have a lot of partners, or could, or who could be at risk of fragmenting the network if they were to leave, right? Or if there was to be some issue, because they are connected to so many. Your in degree score are those partners who chose, or excuse me, are the organization or the number of organizations that chose that organization. So think of it as the arrows coming into the partner. And then the out degree are the number of partners that organization chose. So this is, think of them as the arrows going out of the node. So this early childhood organization, they selected a lot of partners, but they also were selected by a lot of partners. But the reason that their score is only a 65% though, is because these partners, the ones that chose them and who they chose, were a lot of the same partners. So the degree centrality score takes that into account and isn't going to count that relationship twice in that way. So that's something that you can look at in that way. But like, so for instance, person, their connections to these 25 and these 35 are a little bit more unique from each other. So that's why their score is a little bit higher, because they have not as many reciprocal relationships that were reported back. So those are the scores. And feel free to, at any time, raise your hand, unmute yourself, ask a question. I'm happy to dive deeper. Yes, please.
I do have a
Just
question. I
jump
want to
right in.
make
Yes, please.
sure the N degree centrality means they chose the is the opposite. So it's that the organization, for instance, like Early Childhood One,
Yeah.
chose outward.
So the in degree score, so this is showing 30 partners
Chose
chose
them.
this organization as a partner. So when they were taking the survey, 30 other respondents chose them. This is the score that's saying when they took the survey, that's how many partners they took, or excuse me, that's how many partners they selected, right? So what's really interesting here, right, is you have like this public health group. They only selected 12 partners of people of organizations they felt that they're connected to. But 24 organizations were like, no, 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 we're connected to public health, right? So it's interesting, right? So you can look at the reciprocity as well. And go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering if there's a spot for us to pull these definitions at a later date, if I don't
Yes.
remember.
Yes, definitely. We do actually have an interpretation guide and a website it's all online. So we're going to share that information with you. It's in the PowerPoint and we'll follow up with that. But yes, definitely. And there's not only definitions, but also ways that you can interpret and some action steps that you might use from the data. One thing I'll say real quick about the out degree score is sometimes you'll notice that there's zeros here. And those are your non-respondents, right? Because they didn't, or those who maybe responded but didn't get to that question. So these are the people who didn't pick any partners. But you can still see that even though they didn't respond, we're still learning about relationships to that organization. And so, it is nice to get 100% response rate. We know it's not always achievable, right? But we still do learn from them. There's not one organization in this group, in this example, right, that was a true isolate, right? That no one selected them and then they didn't answer and didn't select anybody else. So, but if you have zeros here, those are what we call isolates. And so, depending on if they answered the survey, right, and they selected nobody, well then, that's a flag, right? Like, how can we get you better connected to organizations? If they didn't answer the survey and no one picked them, but that people should have, and it was interesting, that was just, more of a conversation to think about of like, well, what's going on there? We know people are connected to them. So why didn't, so the best part about this data too is that you all know your communities, you all know the people and the organizations behind the data. So you can put more context to it, right? And you can really use this to help tell or validate different stories or tell different stories, right? With the data. And so real quick, I'll go into the GIS map. Sometimes this loads long, depending on bandwidth at the moment. But right now, this example is mapped in Montana, like the Bozeman area of Montana. But you can see here that you can map your network connections geographically. So if you have an address for your partners, you can see it across, a state or a community, a region. And so what's really cool is you can see, and you can do the same things you can in a network map. So take off and filter by different questions. So you can see if as you're looking at different types of activities, maybe no one's working on policy together in a certain area of the community, right? And that's like where the capital is. And you're like, well, that's weird. Why is no one working on policy in the capital, right? So you can think about it that way and look at the geographic data that way. Another way is we do have some base layers. There's only a couple in here right now. And this was from the 2019 CHR&R County Health Rankings and Roadmaps data set. So we have percent children in poverty, their health factors ranking, outcomes, average life expectancy, age, and then if they were rural or urban. And so you can kind of look at that as well, you know, depending on what you're working on, to see, okay, are we covering, you know, you know, looking at this extra layer of data, right? Like, so this one is just showing that in this area, there's less poverty, right? So this is an early childhood network, right? We can tell that, okay, we don't, if this was darker color, we could say, okay, we need to focus on some other things, right? Like, not only are, you know, we're working on early childhood education, but there's also a poverty situation happening in our communities. So how can we look at this, you know, again, holistically in a way, because we know that a lot of these organizations are also part of other networks, right? Like it's a kind of a network way of working. And so trying to think about how can we, again, leverage the work that is happening in our communities, and trying to figure out, you know, to best solve, you know, or tackle community problems. So that's the GIS map. If you do not have addresses in your data set right now, don't worry, there is a way to add them. It is a little manual at the moment, but we can talk with you or work with you if you do want to get those updated, or get those put in. I find value in the GIS map, especially if you're working across different regions or different areas too. And then, if I'm missing anything in the chat, please feel free to just, you know, stop me at any time. And I'll go just quickly over network maps, because we'll dive more into this when we do some of our scenarios. But your network maps is you have, I kind of think of it as like baking a cupcake in a way. So you have like a couple of these different fields, right? So you have show results based on. And so these are your relational questions. So I think of this as like our, you know, like the cake part. So like, say like you're choosing like, I want to make like a vanilla cupcake, right? And so this is the cupcake I'm making, and I'm going to make, and then I'm going to tag on some of these other non-relational data points. And that could be like the different frosting flavors that I want to, you know, put together. And so really any of your network maps can be a combination of a few of those items, right? So for the sake of this walkthrough, I will quickly just show you one example. So like, if we were looking at what are the common ways that they're working on together, and we are going to be adding on a deselect and a select all button coming soon, for all of these little attribute or selections over here. Actually, I think I might have frozen on me. Let me give it a second. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to go here and I'm going to say, okay, I'm only want to look at those who have the most integrated level of connectivity, right? So these are the partners who said that they have this mutual binding relationship, that they support each other. We also know that this is the most resource intensive relationship to manage and maintain, right? And so these are the ones, or the folks that are having those deep relationships. You can see the arrows here, and that goes back to the in degree and the out degree. For example, this is a reciprocal relationship between HEC1 and this PH1, right? Because they both chose each other as a partner. So that's where the arrows go both ways. So you can look at the in degree and out degree in the visualizations as well. I always color my nodes by something, right? I like to kind of put that level of kind of like a sprinkle on top of like, what does this mean? And so if you have an attribute like org type or something like that, you can show the color by those. And so then you can really start to see, oh, okay, well, those who are working at this level of intensity are kind of sectored off a little bit, at least in this health sector, right? Those working in health are mostly integrated with each other, which makes sense, right? And then others are kind of more dispersed. Like this group, you know, they're working really across sectors, you know, at this high level of intensity. So that's just something interesting, right, to pull out. You can size your nodes by any of those scores. So right now it's sized by centrality. So these guys, right, they have the most connections, we can tell. This one doesn't. But if you sized it by like, you know, open to discussion, you know, a lot of people in this network in this example are very agreeable, apparently, right? But in your example, it might not be that case, right? You might have some that are really small and some that really stand out. And so I encourage you to go to each of these scores and just size the nodes by them and see if you see really something like anything interesting, right? To say, oh, like, why is that the case? Or, you know, and you'll see it, right, with your data. I can't find a good example at the moment, but if I did like in degree or out degree, right, you'll kind of see a little bit of a difference in size. So like these people have a lot of people coming into them, right? A lot of people selected them as a partner, and that kind of thing. So you can size the nodes, you can color the nodes. You can also add on these little halos too. So when you ask those non-relational questions, you can show that data in your network maps as well. So I can select any of those questions here, and then I can select the response to view, excuse me. And if I'm like, who has expertise in early learning? Well, a lot of people, right? This is this example is an early learning example. So I would hope there's a good, you know, a good amount of that. But what about social and emotional mental health? Oh, great. You know, we know that's a big topic right now. We need a lot of those people. Okay, so we know who we can lean on, right? Or we can see who's kind of bridging multiple groups. Or this person here, they're the only ones who contribute this, and you know they can give that to these two partners who may not be getting it somewhere else, right? You can layer on this non-relational data, and we'll show that in an example. Lastly, before we jump back into some scenarios, if you have some settings, you can show your legend or not show your legend. When you click on a node, you can get details about that node. So it has attribute information, it has their address, and it has their scores here too. You can easily click over and get to their member profile, or you can even customize what you want to show up in this box as well. You can select this and see ego map. So you can say, oh, I want to see just the ego map of this organization, you know, at this level of intensity. So you can like, and then at any point you can just bump back out. You can just, you know, keep going, boom, ooh, that's interesting, you know, ooh, you know, like you can really see like the connectivity of some networks, or excuse me, some organizations like in their own personal network, right? Some organizations are in a well-coordinated network themselves and others are not, right? Like their partners don't talk to each other, like they're the connector. And so you can see that too, like this organization, there's not a lot of lines between the organizations. They're all kind of coming to and from this main one, right? So this organization is the connector, right, of this group, versus some of those other ones, like they were in a more coordinated level of, you know, connectivity. Like this one has a, well, I guess I did the same one. But yeah, so you can keep clicking back. You can pin your nodes. So if you don't want them to float around and you're like, stay, it can do that. I will say it kind of like shrinks the node, like the map a little bit, but you can zoom in and out using these buttons here, and that's really helpful. You can change the spacing between the nodes too, if you wanted to show labels or not, right? So if you wanted to kind of make it anonymous or just show by an attribute, you can take labels off. You can increase those font sizes, decrease it, change colors and all those kinds of things, or take those arrows off. I really find value in the arrows because it's really helpful to know who chose who, right? And then you can take a snapshot, right? You can, at any point in time, if you're like, I like how this map looks, you can click this button and it will download a PNG of your map. And so it does, I think it, if it opens, it will show up looking like it's like black, but it's actually just transparent. So when you put it on, it's just clear. So that's how that works there. And then the other part is that you can filter. So right now, we are kind of filtering by these response options. But if I go back to kind of this network member selection question, this is the question again where they pick their partners. So as I mentioned in the raw data, some people, you know, pick their partner and then may not answer about them. So this selection here will give you every single relationship that was reported, right? Because we know sometimes it people kind of filter off as they, don't answer about certain partners. So this data or this selection will show you every dyad. And then you can go in and filter your data. You can filter by, if it will pop out for me, maybe. It's being sassy. We'll get back to this one because we'll be playing with that later. But you can filter your data too by these network maps. So if I said, hey, I want to take out like local health departments and see, actually, I just want to look at like what schools and health clinics are doing together. I can go to my key over here. Actually, I think it's all frozen. Hold, yeah, it's frozen. I'm going to reload. While we're doing that, we might just start the scenarios, and I'll come back to this when we do that, but for the sake of time. But feel free to ask questions or if there's anything else, and I will pop over into this one for you real quick. And I'm just going to leave it like this for a moment because I do have to try to reload this real quick. Okay, there we go. It's loading. Okay, it's loading. There we go.
All right. So we're going to dive into some scenarios. So the first one is looking at important roles members play. So let's imagine you got word that the contact at the state agency who has worked closely with your network for years is leaving or retiring. And the new person representing that organization does not want to stay as involved as the last person because the organization will have new strategic aims. So now you look and see that this organization is a key player and is connected to over half of the network.
Now we're going to walk through this. I'm going to dive into, oh, sorry, I did it again. I didn't mean to stop sharing. I'm going to dive into the platform part. I think my whole thing's like delayed a second. There we go. Okay, so it thankfully, here we go, like updated itself here. So just to quickly finish this one, but so you can easily like filter out in and out, right? We'll get to this again in our example here. So say you, again, that the contact from one of your public agencies or maybe one of your key players is going to be leaving the network and a new person's coming in. So the first thing I would do is I would go here and I would sort by that organization name, and I would find them. In this example, we're using this Board of Cooperative Education Services, and we can see that, oh, okay, this organization is connected to 63% of the network, right? They 24 partners selected them, they selected 26, they're really well connected. Ooh, they're also really valued, right? They have a really high value score, they really are involved, they can contribute a lot. Ooh, but man, they are really reliable, right? A 3.62, that is high. And also, in support of the mission. So they are all for it. So one thing that you might think about is, okay, with this new contact, will they have a difference? Do they have different strategic aims that they're trying to achieve? Will they not be as open to the mission, right? May not be as reliable, right? We do have, at the end of the day, there are individuals or contacts, right, who are representing these organizations at the network table, right? So it is, with turnover, those risks are real, right? You have someone who's really all in, and then if they tend to have to leave the network, or if they or if you have that naysayer, right, and you're like, oh, I wonder if it'd be really nice, if anyone was going to have turnover, right, if it's someone who's going to be the one who's going to be disruptive, right? So you can look at your network scores and see the data that way. But then if you go into your network map, and for this example, I did code this data, and I coded that organization with a key player as a specific org type. And we can work with you to get that coded for you as well, if you wanted to kind of do this example yourself. But what I would go in here is I would say, okay, at the highest level, if I take out my key player who's leaving, is my network going to fall apart? No, that's great, right? Everybody's still connected. We're doing good. But right, if I go into their specific ego map, let me go into, think I got him. I think I got the right ego map here. Sometimes it bounces around a little bit. So you have to, but you can select, let me pull him here. So if I want him, where'd you go? Stop moving. Hang on, I'm gonna take off the air or the halos for a second, because the halos are giving it a little distracting at the moment. But if I clicked into his ego map specifically, no details, and I took out themselves, even in their own network, right? They don't fall apart. So that's really helpful to see, right? Really giving me the no detail. Apologies. Sometimes even it can be a little, there we go. It switched it on me. Be a little, as we call it, partner can be a little sassy sometimes. So don't worry. Sometimes, everybody has their days. So if you take out the key player, right, even in their own network, for the most part, their own network stays connected if they leave, right? Except for this organization here. This organization does become disjointed in their own network, right? So we want to make sure that whoever takes over this role at least pays special attention to this one organization, right? Because these other ones are still pretty connected, but this guy, they kind of get left out if they were to leave. So you can look at their individual networks, you can look at the whole network, you can take out certain organization types or organization groups, looking at those key players. One thing that I would do as well is I would go to this key players member profile, right? And I would actually print it out and look to see, okay, who are they connected to? How are organizations perceiving them? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to meet with this new contact and I'm going to say, this is the level of commitment, the level of involvement that Sally had before, and we're hoping that you can bring that same level of commitment for the Board of Cooperative Education Services, that Sally did, or whatnot. So you can go here and kind of look at that information and see, okay, again, you're a really connected person. How can we make sure we don't lose that? Here's the scores, and here's how, the organization has been perceived so far, and it's been perceived highly. So we want to keep, you part of that network, part of this network in the same way that you have been. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, someone leaving their role. It could be the organization completely leaving the network totally, right, too. And so there might not be someone replacing them. And so this is just a good way of strategically looking at the data to kind of see how you can help this new person step into the role in the network, and know who they're already connected to, know who they should be meeting with coffee or whatnot. And so then it's not something that they have to kind of figure out, right? But that there's kind of a smooth transition, and then that won't hinder anything within the, the working of the network. So I'll go back to our PowerPoint for this piece, and then we'll keep going. Feel free to, again, interrupt if you have any questions.
Yes. So the terms we covered in this last scenario is first key player. So that is a member of the system who's connected the most out of the network. The network end can heavily rely on these key players. So if they're no longer participating in the network, it could be a risk to your system not functioning as effective anymore. And then we also talked about degree centrality again. So that is the percentage of partners connected to an organization in and outgoing, measuring that node's activity and popularity in the network. So these scores are best judged on a scale relative to the range of other scores in a particular network. The maximum degree centrality score is always the total number of nodes in a network minus one, because the node cannot be connected to itself. Next slide. You're mute if you had something else to add.
Nope, nope, all good. Sorry, it's just
Gotcha.
delayed. It's like delayed every time I click the button. So,
No worries. So here are a few of our recommendations on network management. So here are some key questions to think about. Which network members have the highest degree centrality scores? What happens if this organization was to leave or cut ties with different types of organizations? You can compare degree centrality and the value scores. Do those same members score high on both of the metrics? Do they also have high individual trust and degree centrality scores? And here are some few strategic action steps you guys can take. So organizations with high scores on multiple metrics may be particularly advantageous. Partners and important members to retain within your network. Identify if it is important that the new contact maintains the same level of connectivity to the network. If it is important, just take care to integrate the new contact into your network meetings and bringing them up to speed on the work being carried out in their organization's role in the network success.
I have to click it twice. Apparently that's it.
Awesome. So now we're going to jump into our second scenario where we would leverage our member profiles. So let's imagine you're going to a community meeting with some network members that you're not as familiar with to discuss a new initiative or intervention for the network. You want to walk into this meeting as prepared as possible on how to integrate this new initiative into the network. So in this case, you would look up the member profiles for each of the attending organization partners. And using the network map, you realize that there is a critical partner who is not invited. So Sarah will now walk us through the scenario of partner.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways that you can access member profiles. One is when you get to your home screen, when you first log in and you click on your project, on this overview screen, you'll see kind of latest member activity. These might be members who, if you're currently in data collection, someone who just recently answered the survey. It could also be someone who just, if we've sent out the link for members to click on and view their member profile, it also shows the date of when they may have access, right, their member profile and viewed it. So there's an easy way to just, you can click on their name here. If you get to the screen and you're like, oh, that's who I want to know, right? You can click and get to them easily that way. You can get to them from the members area. You can easily search. So if you say, okay, we're going to have some childcare folks, so I can go here. These are all hyperlinked. So if you just click on this, it will take you directly to their member profile. So that's really nice. If you wanted to share out the member profile to the respondent, there is a way to copy what we call the respondent profile link. So you can copy that. It will automatically copy to your clipboard, and then you can just kind of paste that into an email message or however you're communicating with them, and just say, hey, here's your profile, right? We also, send these out too as part of our projects with you all, and set something up, right, for the respondents to have access to a view of their data. So you can view it that way. You can search for them there, but you can also find them in, like I mentioned, get to it from that node details box. At the very bottom, there is a button that says, click to get to member profile. But so let me, so for example, say we are going to a meeting, this might take a minute just to get set up. But say we're going to a meeting where it's going to be a new policy initiative. And because of that, we want to kind of see, okay, we asked in our survey what, don't freeze on me again. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now, bear with me. And we are currently working on some updates to optimize the speed of network maps. So if yours loads slowly, as this is doing right now, we will be sending updates around that soon, because our dev team is adamantly working to try to optimize these, make them load faster for us all. So as it's doing this, what's really cool about, again, having these different survey response options is now I can get to the nitty gritty and I can see basically little networks around each of these data points. So let me see, it might be my connection today too, because the other day it did not load like, but and in the meantime, I can just keep moving on too if we need to, and I can go back to it. But I might just actually just reload the whole page. In all effort, I always just reload sometimes. It always helps. Well, so what I'm trying to get to is to show basically just the connections that are around advocacy or policy only. So I'm going to keep working to get this set up. But for instance, say that like we were having a network and this is the policy network and all these connections here are those who said that they work on policy together. But we noticed that we did not include, the BHG one here. And we're like, well, they're really integrated into this whole policy network and they're not invited to this new meeting on this new initiative. So maybe we should invite them, right? Maybe they should be there. And so how can we use the data to really look at that, to kind of, back to the beginning. You stinker. It's definitely having a sassy day today, I would say. So I apologize for that. But for the sake of moving on, now it just froze on me again. Okay, but again, I'm just going to use this as that example of, say that all of these connections are around policy. We can easily, then you can kind of see to say, oh, well, wait, this person's wasn't invited to the meeting. And not only are they, working on policy, but they also, I want to look to see who contributes that type of, no. Oh, there we go. What is the most important type of role? So you have different relational questions. This one might say, or non-relational, this one might say like what contributions can your organization or resources, can your contribution or services, can your organization contribute to the network? And so here, I want to show specifically on those who have experience in advocacy or policy change only, right? And so, okay, well now it's being really sassy on me. I might have to, I'm going to click out of it and come back. But in the meantime, I'm not sure, Elena, if you have the PowerPoint up on your end by chance. And just to share that last screen, just so I can kind of maybe reset something on my screen. Because for whatever reason, it is not, it is being super sassy with me. And all, with technology, sometimes you just have to, I can't restart my computer right now, but in all, sometimes you just have to go back and go back in, right? So I'm going to do that real quick, because for whatever reason, it is just not agreeing with everything that I want it to do right now. Let me see if I can get this set up. I do not know why it's being so sassy today. And we can also share to the other recording from one of our other sessions on this so that you can kind of see the full experience of what this was going to look like, right, as we were clicking through. I'm guessing that they might also be doing some updates to the system at the same time, possibly, and it's not agreeing with my system at the moment. So Yeah, because it is just being super sassy with me. Okay, I'm going to just share, I'll go back and just share the PowerPoint. We'll share the other recording with you, and worst case, I am happy to get on another call and walk through a specific scenarios with you. I apologize for this technical difficulty of the system at the moment. But let me go back into this and we can finish this part, and then I can still see if it's going to work for this next one, which it should, because we're going to be out of the.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Okay, I don't know why my internet cut out. It just seems like it's just one of those days. But we appreciate you all bearing with us today. Okay, so let's go over some of the terms that we covered in this scenario. So as you might be familiar with, we have overall value and trust scores. Overall value essentially measures how much members value one another by capturing members' perception of each other among 3 dimensions that we use. One is power and influence, then we have level of involvement and resource contribution. The overall value score reflects the average of the scores along those 3 dimensions. This assessment is at both the whole network and individual node level. And then we also have trust, which measures how much members trust one another by capturing members' perceptions of others along 3 other dimensions, which are reliability, mission alignment, and openness to discussion. And side note real quick, as we know we're throwing a lot of terms at you, but the social network analysis interpretation guide has all of it. So we're just reviewing this, but you can always check those terms out later in that guide. So we have this overall trust value, which has those 3 scores, which reflect the average of those 3 scores amongst those dimensions. This is also assessed at both the whole network and individual node levels. And then for this next page, we have how to leverage a member profile. So essentially, these can be downloaded in advance of community meetings or gatherings to give you a quick reference guide to each partner and their place in the network. This can help guide your efforts to build new relationships, leverage existing contacts, and avoid creating redundant partnerships. Additionally, you can also share profiles with partners to use themselves as a map of their network. This can be a powerful tool for engaging them in the network tracking process and provide a tangible resource and benefit to drive involvement in future surveys and process. It's also really helpful for demonstrating an organization's connectedness to community members, funders, and other key stakeholders. So we think using member profiles is a really cool way to also give data back to individuals. Oftentimes, we all probably have experienced at one point or another being asked to take a bunch of surveys, and then we don't know what's done with that data. We don't know what data is being collected. But the neat thing about these member profiles is it gives some data back to each person who took the survey, and it could be a way to incentivize taking the survey as well. We have our recommendations on network management. So these are some key questions we have to ask to stimulate some really thoughtful conversations. To include, are any of these members connected to hard to reach members? Do these members contribute unique resources to help spearhead the initiative? Are they aligned with the mission of the network? Are they perceived as being reliable? Are they perceived to contribute resources or have a high level of involvement? And then we have our strategic action steps, which include identifying network members with the highest individual value scores and making sure that these members' strengths are properly leveraged. Consider also whether the high score is more a reflection of the overall organization or the individual organizational representative, or both. It's important to remember that when interpreting value scores, that the number of partners who chose them, the in, which we were talking about earlier, is more correlated to those scores than who the member picked, which was the out, as a partner. If the member has lower value scores, they may need to be engaging in more ways with other members.
All right, so now we're going to go through our last scenario here. So this one is about tracking network information over time. So imagine you hosted that meeting in scenario 2, and you want to track who said they anticipated they would be willing to help with the new initiative and other notes from that meeting. Once the initiative is launched, you want to see how that intervention impacted partnerships within the network. So now you add a new attribute to track the level of involvement the member anticipated contributing, and you add a notes attribute to track your notes from that meeting. When ready, you set up and launch a new project to collect data on how the new initiative has impacted the network. And so that's with the partner CPRM subscription.
Here. Okay. Let me go back in here. Oh, see, it decided to be a little less sassy right now. So let me just see here. Let's see if we can go back to our other scenario, if it's gonna let me not be so sassy. But so for here, you can see that these are the organizations that said they just provided resources to each other, which is, it's a lot, right? There's a lot of connectivity happening around that that particular activity, right? If I deselect it, which I did, it will have nobody showing, right? Because nothing, I don't have any, I'm telling it to not show any activity at the moment. So I'm going to go back to show these advocacy and policy, see if it does this. This is my advocacy and policy network. So I'm going to kind of jump back to scenario 2 real quick. We're going to hold our meeting, right? So I can see here that says, oh, okay, these are, we invited, the main players of who we thought were going to be, connecting people, but we didn't invite this person here, right? This MC1. And it's like, well, they're interesting because they're connected to a few other organizations that aren't connected to anybody else, only to them, right? So they might be interested, especially if like we need to get these health clinics on board, we need to go through this organization, right? So let's make sure that we're especially if it's like a healthcare or a health initiative, right? Let's make sure that we're including them because they're connected to these health organizations. And let's make sure we're connecting or adding this person too, because they're connected to these other health clinics as well, right? So we want to make sure that whatever the type of initiative is, right, that we have the right type of partners at the table, and that when we're looking at it, we can strategically say, well, who should be at the table? We don't necessarily need everybody there, but we need people there who are going to be connecting to the right, groups of partners that we need to get this initiative off the ground, right? So then if I go back in here and I say, okay, let me see if this is being weird at the moment. See if it goes back to this. For some reason, my halos aren't showing up all of a sudden. But I can't restart my, okay, there we go. It just needed a minute to catch up. So now I can look to see, okay, these are the organizations that not only said that they work on advocacy and policy together with their partners, but now the halos are showing those who work or those who said that they can contribute that type of resource to the network. So we definitely want to make sure that we have these folks at the table when we're talking about the new initiative, because they already say that they can bring this type of expertise, this type of knowledge to the table, right? Now that we know that it's also like a healthcare initiative too, maybe we also look at who also brings physical health knowledge, right? So we have all of our healthcare organizations that we already said we were going to kind of bring in, just to make sure that we're bringing the right folks who contribute that specific expertise, or looking at that, kind of mini network, right? So like, again, this is the advocacy and policy network. But if I wanted to look at those who are working on client assessments together, I would deselect this and I would select that one. And then I would get a little mini network of only those organizations and those relationships around client assessments. And of course I did that. And now it's like, why did you change me? I was working just fine. So you have your client assessments, right? The other thing that's really interesting too, right, is sorting, sizing by those value and trust metrics, right? So if this is a new initiative, right, who's actually going to have the level of involvement? Well, we got a really involved group here. So they're all like, we should have no problem, right, saying, you know, how willing are you to be involved in this new initiative? You know, all of them should be, you know, pretty willing. Your network might have a lot of smaller nodes in here. And so one thing to consider is if you do look at that and you're asking people to come into a new program, a new initiative, a new thing, another thing that they have to work on, look at that level of involvement score, because maybe they're not really involved as it is. So like, are they actually going to contribute? Or B, maybe they're tapped out, maybe they're too involved, right? And they need a break. So kind of looking at that score to find the balance and figuring out, well, like who's going to be able to contribute resources to this new initiative, right? So different things like that. So that's that piece. How you can go in and update information. So we had this meeting. Now I want to track what we learned in that meeting. So I can go into the settings area and we have this manage attribute area. Here you can add attributes. So this was from our other demo of how I like added in some meeting notes. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a single select attribute. And I'm going to say, okay, this is everybody's level of, oh my gosh, I can't type. Level of contribution, right? And then I'm going to look here and I'm going to say a little, and a lot. And then I can easily save that attribute. So now it's a new attribute in the system. I can go and tag my members with that attribute. I'm also going to add in a text attribute because I want to add in my notes, right? So this is our December 6th note. And I'm just going to have that be an open-ended field because I want to be able to type that in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my members area. And from here, you can assign attributes individually, or you can kind of do them by bulk. So if you go into this area and assign attributes, you can easily search. Like, so I knew everybody who came who was in childcare said that they could contribute, or here, and I can, let me select all, and then I can bulk assign them that level of a contribution. They said they can contribute a lot, right? So I can bulk assign those, and so then it's going to go ahead and give it for that. So what's nice is here, I can clear the selected. And then what's really helpful too is you can also like easily kind of edit attributes here too if you need to. So if you wanted to change the fields, you know, add in like, you know, not applicable because they didn't attend the meeting. You know, oh my gosh. Well, now it opened the whole world of, there we go, NA. So you can add types here. You can even add whole new categories over here as well. The only thing you can't add open-ended attributes on this side. You have to do it from the settings side. So that's the only thing. But you can also click into a member. So you can say, okay, well, I know that, you know, the Board of Education or this health department, they're the ones who showed up to the meeting, and I'm going to go into their member profile and I can easily edit their information from the member profile side. So you can save it as a PDF, or you can click this button to edit it, and it will take you to that member's like contact card. And so, for example, I could put in here their level of contribution is a little, they are, but here's my notes, and I'm going to say they seemed excited, but have a lot going on right now. So I can just kind of track that information, right? And then I can save this. And then when I go back to my member profile, it will show up in, once it loads, it will show up here in what's called this information tab. So this has all the attribute information. So here it has my December 6th meeting notes. So I can track and I can look to see, okay, what's happening, or I can go back in and edit that, right? If like we have another meeting or something. So you can continue to add different types of attributes, or if someone's, if you're holding different types of events or holding webinars or sharing different types of resources out to folks, and you want to track if they're using it or if they're, asking questions about it or whatever it is, you can add, open-ended, single choice and multiple select attributes as well. So that's how you can view that. And then what's also really fun is that once it's added into the system, especially a single choice attribute, you can then view that in the analyzer as well. You can color the nodes by that new attribute. So if you wanted to look at my policy network again, right, and I wanted to view it by those who said their level of contribution, right, I can, I thought it was doing something. I can show that too. So I can go back in, and since it's already set up, it should be. And it will save the state that you were just in for the most part. I guess for that, like it will save like your other settings. So like if you had colors by, or if you had your line set up in a certain way, it will save those settings. So right here I have not size nodes, but color, my willingness, my level of contribution. I'm gonna update that for me in a second here. Once it's done thinking. Being very fast today. It's a good thing. I am meeting with our product folks later today, so I can comment on the level of fast today. Let's see here. Yeah. Might just be my computer. I'm going to restart after this. Okay, we'll come back into that. But in the same way that you were able to show those other colors, you can also show it, show those as well. It's really fascinating. Okay, I'll go back into our PowerPoint for the moment.
Okay, so the key terms we covered through this scenario is attributes. So you can assign each node an attribute. These attributes are used to identify a characteristic for each node. So in that last example, we had added in a notes attribute. So you can go back and add in notes from a particular meeting, and then also a level of commitment attribute that we have put for the different organizations if you are doing a new initiative. Also, we went over longitudinal analysis, so you can track and measure your network data over time, noting how the data has changed and how partnerships evolve over time. And then we looked at relationship budgets, so that time and resources spent managing the relationships to achieve the collaborative's goal. And so here are some of the CPRM subscription features. So you'll be able to pull up network data whenever you need it, pull member data whenever you need it, and showcase network connectivity and funding for funding opportunities. And we do have a question. Go ahead.
Yes, please.
Yes, can you go back to that previous page? Okay, so for longitudinal analysis, if you've done more than one survey, that's what will give you the projection of seeing where the partnerships have gone from 1 year to the second year. But what if people are quote unquote new to the network? How will that information be able to be distinguished to see relationships amongst them? Because that would be, I guess, kind of hard to showcase.
Right. So like at the individual level, like they won't have like a baseline or a time one. So it will just show that they're kind of like, this is their their connectivity at this point. In terms of like for the overall network though, what's great about that though is because organizations do, you know, like there is a fluctuation, right? Like members come, they join, sometimes they have to leave, they have other obligations, or they're part of too many networks, right? And they have to make some decisions. And so one thing that is nice about showing new members into the network, especially in the time too, is just showing the growth of the network too. I mean, sometimes, and you may have heard Danielle Varda speak about this at some point, but you know, a lot of times funders, they'll go and they'll say, hey, we've given you a batch of money and we want to make sure that you're using it to build all this connectivity in the community. So send us a list of, you know, your roster of partners. Okay, the next year, send us your list of partners, and we kind of expect to see more names on that list. It's because, but we always think that more is not necessarily better, right? That it's more of like the quality of the relationships that you want to see change over time. So you don't necessarily want to continue to add like, you know, 20 new members to your network just for the sake of adding them, right? But if there's a strategic purpose for them or value of adding them, and it's worth their time, right? Then yes, let's add them to the network and grow the network and reach that population, right? That we're not able to reach with the current membership we have, right? Or maybe you look at your data and you see that there's a resource that your network's lacking. Maybe there's not a lot of expertise in social and emotional health or legal matters or just being able to provide certain services, right? Or work with certain populations, right? So if you look at your data and you see that there's a gap in what's being contributed, that's another way of saying, okay, well, who in our community can we bring into the network that can bring us this resource that we can so we can grow the network in that way. So you're being more intentional about how you're growing it as well. But I do like, but so it doesn't necessarily mess with the data, right? Like not everybody's going to be the same. Even the same contact isn't necessarily going to answer the survey in time 1 and time 2, right? But we take that into consideration, but it's really just like, again, holistically looking at, did, you know, perceptions stay positive? Did they change? Did they increase in positivity, right? Like just looking at different trends at an aggregate level too. But yeah, and we can dive deeper into that too. I know you guys are working on your time 2 survey now, so or data analysis right now. So there's going to be a lot of fun information in that report that, you know, we can dive in with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And so,
I'll go ahead.
yeah.
I'll just go to this one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And here are some key questions to consider. So what network activity do you want to track over time? In what ways do you anticipate a new intervention to change the network? When is the right time to conduct a follow-up or second round of network data collection? And here are some strategic action steps you can take. So consider what the new initiative may require from partners to implement, their time, staffing, funding, etc. Think about your members' relationship budgets and if they have space in their budget to work on this new initiative. Partners within the community are likely already overwhelmed with meetings and the time needed to engage in cross-sector opportunities. So try not to overwhelm partners with excessive invitations and requests.
All right, so we recognize that this is a lot of information to digest. And so we want to share some tools with you that you can take away and use that reflect what we covered today and more. So keep an eye out in your email this week. We're going to be sending out a What's Next packet, which essentially includes a lot of useful resources, including next steps on using your data. We'll also be sending out some facilitation worksheets to include the data scavenger hunt that we shared with you in an email prior, and we can resend that if needed. And then we also have your social network analysis interpretation guide that we'll also send out again with the password, which as we mentioned, you should only have to enter it once. And then we also have our support hub, which we recommend favoriting it in your browser so you have quick access to it. And this is a wonderful resource to access guides, FAQs, and information to use around your partner CPRM account. And finally, we just want to say that we really appreciate your partnership with us and hope that you found this workshop useful. We appreciate your patience. You know, technology, we've all dealt with that at some point or another. And we'd like to open up the floor to any questions that you might have.
We also have a feedback survey as well, that if you're able to take a moment, or if you can scan the QR code, or Elena will also include a link in the follow-up email as well. Just gives us feedback on any things that we can do to improve this workshop for others, or topics that you would like to see in future workshops, or information that you would like to learn more about. So if you have about 3 minutes to just share our feedback, that would be super valuable for us, because we want to make this the most valuable experience for you all as well. But let us know if you have any questions, and we can dive into those right now.
I just want to say thank you. I think this was really helpful. And if I'm looking back to when I started maybe 8 months ago, this was all foreign language to me, and I had no idea what this meant. And I think over time you start to learn little by little, but this has been probably, I wish I could have had access to something like this when I first started, but then I still probably wouldn't have fully been able to grasp it without being involved in it and touching and feeling and making some mistakes along the way. But I'm really excited to even view this again if we have access to the recording, to kind of just
Definitely.
and work through some of the things, because I think this will help me be a better network manager. And as our newer network is being developed, allow me to be able to put things together in a different format, and really look at their feedback that they provided. So thank you so much for this. And thank you, Elena, for like making sure I was here.
Yes, yeah, so glad that you're
No
here
worries.
too. And as you're
Yeah,
diving through
it
too, if
happens.
there's like certain scenarios that you're like working through, and you're like, oh, that was interesting, but like my situation's more like this, let us know too, and we can, look in your data, walk through it with you, because once you kind of do it a couple times, right, like you kind of learn, what the ins and outs of what each button does, right, and so then you can kind of really play, right? Again, the context, right? So you are able to be like, oh, this is really interesting. Or what if I just like go down kind of a little rabbit hole and kind of see what everybody contributes, or see what this, you know what I mean? And then you can really learn a lot. And everything that's in that raw data file is also online in the platform. So, and vice versa. So if you like looking at numbers more than you like looking at the other things, right? You can still glean insights, right, from the raw data as well. So we can show you some tips and tricks about that as well. But if there's no other questions, I know we're right at time, and I want to be respectful for everybody's time, because this was a little bit of a longer meeting today, but we appreciate you spending your hour and a half with us, and your flexibility with our sassy technology at the moment. But again, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are always here as a support partner to answer questions, or just dive into your data. It's one of the best parts, I think, of our job, is to really dive in. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon and have a good week. But thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.